name is Teresa Lux. I am Latin Director of Ladies at UX and one of the organizers of Talk US 2020 Across Cities meeting. I am speaking from São Paulo, Brazil, and for accessibility's purpose, I will describe myself. I am a Caucasian woman, brown eyes, light skin, brown hair with turquoise green highlights, black t-shirt, red glasses, and pink headphones. Behind me, I hung some posters with face from Norman Nielsen Group, a poster with the logo of Ladies at UX, and another one, a picture for Amelia Earhart, a certain and inspiring woman. Talk UX is an annual international design conference organized by Ladies at UX, a global, friendly, and collaborative organization that has created an international community of inspired and encouraging women that works with technology. This is the 6th edition of the event and is being completely broadcast through this channel. Now, we are going to talk about a very important issue for people who work with user experience, with a very darling person. Melissa Strader currently manages a design group in Google Health. She spent 10 years working at Google on Google Fiber, Google Voice, and Google Analytics, and other products. Prior to Google, she was the chief of UX software for Bloomboard, design leader at eBay, and UX director for Milo.com. Before moving to Silicon Valley, Melissa was a human factor researcher with the University of Maryland Baltimore School of Medicine. Melissa earned a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and Biopsychology, emphasis on the Ohio State University, and studied human factors and applied cognition at George Mason University. We will talk about working as intended, how disability made she a better designer. When Melissa had 2 serious strokes in 2017, people assumed that her 10-plus year UX career was over. Now she leads a design group in Google Health, using what she learned from her health experience to advocate for a better project. In this session, Melissa will share how severe contracts unlocked her resilience and creativity, and how vulnerability changed how she approached her leadership and design practice. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Teresa. It's very exciting to be here. As Teresa mentioned, my name is Melissa Strader. I'm a UX lead with Google Health. I'll describe myself briefly for those who can't see me. I am a woman with dark reddish brown hair that's quite short. I am wearing green glasses today and a green top, and behind me is a geometric white background.
Melissa, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We're really happy to see you here today.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
So I will leave you with your lecture and presentation, okay?
All right, sounds lovely. How do you think you might feel if you had a doctor tell you that it was time to get your affairs in order? Just a few years ago, I had a dress rehearsal for the end of my life, complete with my partner at my bedside in the intensive care unit. And today, I want to share how serious illness and disability have changed my perspective as a designer and design leader. It's very humbling to be talking with you about this today. Not only is this the first time that I've shared my experience publicly, but I also recently celebrated my 3rd year being stroke-free. Often as UXers, when we think about the topic of disability, it's in the form of accessibility or product requirements. But today, I want to offer you my story as a lens for how you might approach your design practice and leadership in your daily life. So first, let me introduce you to 5-year-ago me. If you had told 5-year-ago me that I would go from training for a half marathon to needing help feeding myself, I wouldn't have believed it. I had settled happily into a decade-long UX career in Silicon Valley. I'd had the chance to work at large companies and startups, to be part of transformative teams, and to lead and manage as well. I felt truly blessed to be working at the intersection of technology and people, which had been my dream since I was a girl. It was just a normal day. I was driving home from work and I was rear-ended while I was stopped at a red light. I call it the car accident that changed my life. I lost the ability to use one arm for almost a year. I started having cardiac problems. On some days, my arms and legs would swell so badly that I was bed or wheelchair bound. And then 2017, the worst year of all. 2 brainstem strokes left me unable to do even basic daily tasks for myself. In spite of having first-rate medical insurance and seeing world-class doctors, they had no idea what was causing all of it. Many people, including me, thought that my career was over. I was considered totally disabled and was advised to accept the situation. There were 2 reasons that I wanted to go back to work. The first, looking back, wasn't a very good reason, but the truth was that I had become so attached to my career that I didn't know who I was without it. Imagine waking up one morning and suddenly not being able to do something that you loved to do every single day. One thing that I love about the UX community is that we're largely mission-driven. We want to solve problems for people. Suddenly not having that opportunity was sad and frightening. But it was also a reminder that being a UX professional is just part of my identity, just like it's part of yours. The other reason that I wanted to try going back to work was I work in healthcare. I have the privilege of leading an empathetic team who are working to design experiences that could improve health for people across the world. After this new and intense immersion in the healthcare system, I felt so distraught by what I experienced that I couldn't live with the idea of not doing something about it. And that's still the mission that gets me out of bed in the morning. Returning to work led to a few changes that I'll explore with you today. First, my design practice had to change a lot, and it's the most fulfilling it's ever been. Secondly, I had to turn my design training inward and use it to help me survive what was happening to me in the healthcare system. And then finally, I had to figure out how I was going to lead and scale a global team with just a fraction of the time and physical capacity that I was used to having. What surprised me the most was that even though these sound like very different activities, they turned out to be closely connected. So, how did I adjust as a designer? One reason that I was afraid my career was over was because my old way of working didn't work anymore. From my tools to my equipment to my overall process, everything felt like it was getting in my way instead of freeing me up to be creative. I felt like a new designer again, full of ideas, but feeling hampered by a lack of mastery with my tools. Only I knew how to use the tools. My body just wouldn't cooperate anymore. I could no longer sit upright at a normal desk and chair and use a mouse and keyboard the way that I once had. I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was experiencing was at the heart of what it means to have a disability, feeling a mismatch between my abilities and my environment. Here's how clueless I felt. I literally did a Google search for one-armed designer, looking for somebody who had encountered that specific limitation before. My doctors and employer, they wanted me to succeed and they were supportive, but I felt as though I might as well be asking them to help me design a spacesuit for myself. They had the desire to help, but not the context. It was my therapist who thoughtfully asked, "Why are you only asking able-bodied people for help?" Once I started reaching out to people with disabilities and chronic health conditions, I discovered a community that took resourcefulness to a new level. I met someone who was injured in a bike accident and now makes custom arm slings. I met people who had become whizzes at dictation and hacking everyday objects to meet their needs. The creativity of these communities was inspiring, and they were happy to help. From washing my hair to preparing food, my new community helped me see each challenge as an opportunity rather than an immovable wall. Once I was able to harness my creativity to tackle those daily life tasks, it was time to go back to that original problem of working at a desk to take another look. Prototyping was key because each solution came with additional problems. So by trying different solutions together, I was able to figure out what worked best. I'm very fortunate that my partner is an engineer and architect. We set out on a months-long project to prototype a home workstation that would allow me to work from a fully reclined position. It took many iterations and cardboard mock-ups before we could get sign-off from my physical therapist. I started by testing it at home for 10 hours a week, and it turned out to be a small but meaningful win that I was able to maintain. I still spend many of my hours in this setup with my big-eared assistant. Her name is Little One. In addition to the equipment and tools, I also had to adjust my design process to make it broader and more flexible. High-fidelity work became a luxury to plan around on good days. Voice-to-text handled many of my emails and chats, sometimes while laying down, if that was the best my body had to offer that day. When I woke up each morning, I would take a physical and mental inventory to figure out what I could do and adjust accordingly. I was afraid that these changes would result in poorer quality work, but instead, it forced me to go back to the original problem I wanted to solve and focus in a more deliberate way. My results felt more thoughtful and tailored. Having that flexible toolkit of options gave me resilience to handle ongoing challenges. And that's how I've been able to cope with a new normal that is still very unpredictable and fit it into a corporate schedule. Then there was the challenge of my healthcare experience. So as I was slowly returning to work, my doctors were still at a loss about how to diagnose and treat me. I was on a hamster wheel of increasingly invasive medical tests. I had this chicken and egg situation. On the one hand, I had no unifying diagnosis that would allow me to have a gold standard treatment. And on the other hand, I had no treatment to help me survive day to day while I assembled a care team to help me pursue that unifying diagnosis. I knew that up to half of a doctor's time could be spent just doing paperwork, and that my wellness depended on helping them make sense of that paperwork. I knew I needed to anticipate what they might need in order to treat me. Can you tell where this might be going yet? Yeah, I'm a big fan of prototyping. So I started designing my own version of my medical records and bringing them to my doctors. I asked them for feedback on what was working well and what could be better. I took it away. I iterated. My success metric became whether or not they asked to keep it at the end of the visit. They almost always asked to keep it for their own records. It also showed my doctors that I wanted to be an active partner in my care and led to much more focused conversations that looked at the facts of my case. When I started doing this, I expected that my successful outcome would be helping my doctors find my true diagnosis. I had assumed it was just a needle in a haystack, and I was helping them go through that giant pile of hay. But medicine has a ways to go in its knowledge, and we haven't found that diagnosis yet. What I did find, though, are doctors who care enough about my symptoms today to treat me, and they care about my quality of life. They've allowed me to be a partner in my care, to participate in and design my healthcare experience. So to me, that's been a success. At some point, I started getting comments from my doctors about how well I was adjusting to all of the changes in my life. I had been honest with most of them, explaining that I had both a medical research background and a design background, and I was shamelessly using that to navigate the uncertainty in my case. And then something unexpected started happening. A provider asked if I'd be willing to talk to one of their patients about my experience in solving one of my healthcare issues. And then it happened again with a different doctor. And then it happened again. I had amassed so much specialized knowledge that I was now in a position to educate and support others. So now I host a small weekly support group for complicated patients who are hard to diagnose. Many of the patients I've encountered are women who were initially misdiagnosed with anxiety or stress by a dismissive doctor. All of this has given me a completely new lens to look at healthcare, both as a patient and as a designer. And here's the first surprising connection between my activities. When I went back to work, I was no longer just a designer in healthcare. I was now part of the statistics that I had been designing around. These experiences have made me a storyteller for my team. Having personal stories in the room is especially challenging for complex illness because managing a serious health situation and being gainfully employed are often at odds with one another. Without all of the time spent designing my own healthcare experience and struggling with my own disability, I wouldn't be able to represent these voices in my work. And then there was my third challenge. How was I going to lead and manage a team with a part-time schedule? When it was time to receive my performance review for the first time as a manager after becoming disabled, I expected the worst. I want to share some excerpts of what I found instead. These are direct quotes that people on my team wrote about me to my manager for my performance review. She has challenged me to create a culture of feedback, candor, and respect. I've learned and applied more knowledge from Melissa on leadership than any other manager in my career across all levels of seniority and experience. Melissa has genuine warmth and caring attitude for the people on her team and her peers. It sets a great example for a respectful and inclusive culture. So reading this, as you might imagine, was a relief, but I was also puzzled. Why now, at a time when I can physically do the least and be the least available, was I able to have this kind of impact for my team? It clearly doesn't matter to them that I can't sit at a desk for 40 hours a week. So what had I been doing differently? There were two things that seemed to make the biggest difference. The first was prioritizing. Being forced to prioritize has made me better as a leader. While working 10 or 20 hours a week, I had to say no to most things and only focus on one or two. As an example, when I was working 10 hours a week, here were the priorities that I had written out for myself. The first was scale a happy, healthy team, and the second was advocate for patients. Unless the activity was in service to one of those two things, I almost always said no. Prioritizing in this way forced me to think about how to position my team to handle things rather than me being tempted to handle it myself. I invested in being a stronger coach, giving stretch opportunities, and saying no when we really couldn't take something on. Then my team members started modeling this philosophy too. Prioritizing my team led to them prioritizing each other, creating a culture of care and investment in each other's development and well-being. Showing up was the other element. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But I've learned there's a big difference between just being there and really being there. Showing up for yourself, for others, emotionally, physically. There's so many layers and they all matter. The experience of being in there with people, that's what matters. And so every day when I decide how I want to spend my time, I'm thinking, how can I make this less transactional? And how can I show up for the people in my life? There's a tendency to want to not show up when things are tough. And for me, those have been the most defining moments. I learned that if I only show up when I'm strong and able and capable, I'm robbing people of the opportunity to show up for me. Once I started showing up and accepting help, my relationships inside and outside of work began to change and deepen. Returning to the office after all of my physical changes was one of the most difficult times for me to show up. There was no way to hide the changes in my physical appearance. I was shaky, uncoordinated, and my treatments at the time were giving me horrible side effects. I had red skin, weight gain, my hair was falling out, and so I had shaved my head to try to help with the hair situation. 5 years ago, me would have been horrified at the idea of putting my struggles on display. It felt like this mysterious illness was winning and everyone could see. The first time I walked into a team meeting, I held my breath, waiting for that first inevitable, wow, why did you shave your head? But of course, that would be underestimating my team. Instead, someone pipes up, wow, you look badass. And in that moment, the compassion of my team gave me power and strength when I felt deflated. And they did it because I showed up. I had to face my fears and give them a chance to show up for me. During a time when we place so much emphasis on technology and automation, it's easy to forget that there's a very human side of building products and being a leader. Here's the second connection in my activities that was surprising to me. By suffering through my own medical appointments where I was misdiagnosed and felt dismissed and helpless, and by struggling through my disability alone, and then finding that community of inspiring, strong people who are adapting every day, I developed a level of empathy that I needed to show up differently for my team. What I lacked in time, I now made up for with a deepened understanding of how to inspire and support people, even when you can't solve their problems for them. none of these things, discovering a new way to design, creating my own healthcare experience, and showing up for my team in a new way would have ever been possible if I hadn't shown up in each situation when it was a struggle. Our principal goals in our craft usually sound something like this. We want to delight people, empower them, enrich their lives, elevate. We sweat the details every day to give someone a moment of joy. But we don't talk about how we could or should show up, especially for those who are marginalized or dismissed or forgotten. I'm not sure where I'd be today if I hadn't chosen to keep showing up on what felt like very bad days. I'm sure I wouldn't be here talking with you about this today. So that's my most important and only question for you today. How can you show up, especially when it's tough? Teresa, if you're saying something, I can't hear you.
Sorry, it was amazing, Belisa. Thank you very much for sharing with us.
It's my pleasure.
We really appreciate your participation in everything you said, because it's really inspiring. Thank you very much for that. I think we have some questions for you here.
Sure.
What are different ways that UX can be more inclusive of people with disabilities when hiring and cultivating teams?
Great question. Yeah, especially with building teams. One of my favorite sayings that I've heard is, if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. And I think it can be intimidating sometimes. We're all afraid of making a misstep, or saying or doing the wrong thing, or accidentally offending someone. I'd say one of the most important things is to just be open to asking questions, keep the lines of communication open, and in teams, being able to have an open culture where it's okay for someone to signal that something is not working for them is very important. Disabilities aren't always permanent, and they're not always visible. You probably work with someone right now who has an invisible disability. You may not even know it. And so when you're thinking about the elements of culture in your team, culture is created not by a grand gesture sometimes, but by little activities day to day. It's what we do day to day. So for those who are interested in shifting their culture, thinking about the routines, the habits, the rituals that you do as a group, and thinking about ways to solicit feedback and make sure, are those things working for everyone on the team? Do we have a safe space where people feel like they can speak up if it's not working? Sometimes rotating ownership of those activities can be nice too. So being flexible with your process, being open to adjusting will allow everyone to have a chance to participate in the team culture. I think hiring, one of the things that I have personally appreciated the most that really sets the tone for the hiring process is making sure that you're offering an opportunity for someone to talk about accommodations they might need during the interview. Or during the hiring process, and really normalizing that as just a part of the conversation. Sometimes a person with a disability might be afraid to bring it up. And so if you as the hiring manager, or if you as the company are the one starting that part of the conversation, it can make it feel much more comfortable and inclusive.
I see. There's another question from Bianca Morandi. What advice do you have for the UXers who might be struggling in their works due to the disability or health issues?
I'm sure there are a lot of us. I was afraid I was going to lose my job. And this is not an uncommon thing to worry about how your team might perceive you, how your company might perceive you. I was really grateful and thankful that I had a coworker who encouraged me to speak up and be transparent about my situation. But if I hadn't done that, I think I would have been quite anxious and would have had difficulty. So if you're struggling with this right now, I would encourage you to talk to someone you trust and to start finding support, even if it's not with your own manager or your own team. Finding someone who can validate what you're going through is really important. There are also a lot of, as I mentioned in my talk, a lot of wonderful patient communities and a lot of communities for people with different types of disabilities and health conditions, where there's active conversation about how to approach these challenges in your workplace. I personally believe that the more we do speak up and the more we do make ourselves visible and heard, the more it will become a normal thing to have as part of our workplace. And I think we should celebrate it. It brings diversity into our teams. It brings diversity into our products. And when you're at the beginning and starting to go through it, it can feel very intimidating. But now I feel very proud to bring what I bring to my team, even if it looks different than what I might have expected.
It's important to ask for help if you need. Find someone you can trust. And so the last one from Gabriela Rocha. How could UX teams better incorporate the perspective of people with disabilities when we build products? Also a really good one. There's been a lot of wonderful conversation in the UX community this year about diversity and inclusivity. In some cases, disability gets left off the list. So if you find yourself at a company or within a group where you're already having conversations about building more diverse participant pools to do research, or building more robust personas or more robust use cases that include more perspectives, I'd encourage you to think about whether you're comfortable speaking up and saying, hey, can we make sure we're also including people with disabilities? And keeping in mind that not only is this a very large number of people, but every one of you, if you have not already encountered disability yourself or in someone you love, it's going to happen. And being able to bring that perspective in, it will be critical for making sure that what we're building really does meet the needs of all of our users. Sure. Melissa, again, thank you very much for being with us. We are really proud. It was really inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Guys, Tokyo X started yesterday on the 4th of November and runs until the 5th. It's full of amazing speakers as Melissa from all over the world. Our next guest is Akansha Krupta, designer at Microsoft. And the title of her lecture is, Yes, You Are Enough, 7 Lessons to Tell Us Your Story. So we also can't wait for listening to her. And thank you very much for watching, for being here with us, making questions, and receiving us with so much care. So bye, Melissa. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.